Guys, we're going to be switching over now back over to the front desk, but before we do, there were a couple more questions that came in on the clinical side. So let's go ahead and knock those off before we switch over to the front desk. Okay, if you need to fix an encounter that's already been signed off, there is an unlock type function similar to what you're accustomed to working with inside of Success. So yes, you do have that functionality that you can do. Okay, some people have some clinical alerts that are built based on diagnosis. Yes, you can set up your own favorites list of the different types of groupings of those reminders, so that when you're going in to look at the reminders that are due for a patient, you can switch to different views. So I could have one that was diabetic or something else and switch to those types of reminders, no problem. Okay, and as far as taxing, being able to review all of the refill requests for one doctor. Yes, you can have multiple people being able to review different each other's task. So when you're assigning task, I could say, well, I'm going to assign it to Dr. Ford, but Dr. Ford also wants Nurse Wendy and Nurse John to also have the ability to monitor their different refill requests or lab results, things like that. So multiple people would have the ability to be reviewing each other's. So you do have some different options like that. That also can be used when like someone's out of the office, things like that. Okay, so now switching gears, we're going to go start talking about the front desk practice management side of things. And so we're going to start off by scheduling a patient and then walking through and actually checking a patient in as well. So we're going to do a couple of things there. So the view that I have open right now is more of a practice management front office type view. Now, just like you can in Success today, where you can set up the shortcut of the different task options that you may want to go to, that's not something the quick access toolbar that you have in Success today. That is not an option that you had the ability to set up in Success. Here at Intergy, you can set up the common things that you use, because I have like lots of different options of different sections I might want to go to. But I say, for my job function, there's only a handful of those things that I'm using throughout the day. So I can set up my shortcuts to just allow me to go more quickly to those areas. Now, before we jump directly into scheduling, I just want to show you, if this was a new patient, you do have the quick register option, where I can quickly register a patient if I'm just trying to get them into the back. You also can use an existing account. So if I were going in to register, based on, a guarantor, and this is their child that I've already had, I could pull in some basic information there. The system also has the ability to check for duplication for you. So if you were typing in information that potentially was duplicated, you can have it checking that type of information for you. It also has the ability, like in this case, it says, yes, wait a minute, are you sure you're not talking about someone that's already in the system? So I would have the ability to go in and say, I want to use someone that's already there. And then you also can set up required fields. In Success, you had the ability to go in and define some fields as required. In Intergy on the demographics, you pretty much can make any of the fields on the screen required. So I just wanted to show you a couple of things like that. But this is basically where you would go in to do the demographic capture for the patient. You do have things like gender identity, sexual orientation, and other fields, but we'll look at the full screen here in a moment. But let's go into scheduling a patient. Intergy is based on setting up the scheduling rules or preferences similar thought process to what you do in Success Today, where you set up the days of the weeks, the times of day, the types of appointments, the limitations, the restrictions, no more than 2 new patients in the morning. I only do surgeries on Thursdays in the morning and Friday in the afternoon, so I can go in and put up on restrictions. One big difference, though, is the ability to set up templates so that when the end user is looking to go in and schedule an appointment, if I have preferences on when I do certain things at certain times of days, in Success I could have set up a rule that said I only like to have a new patient at a certain type of time of day. But I couldn't see that on the view when I was going in to schedule the appointment. So Intergy actually allows you to overlay a template so that I can see the type of appointment that I typically do for that particular day. And you notice I'm working off of an old date. It just makes it easier for me not to have to recreate all the data every time. So the system thinks it's January 11, 2018. But when I'm going into schedule, now I'm currently looking at a multi-doctor view, and I can see up to 5 doctors displayed at one time. If there were more than 5 in the group that I had selected, then I would just use the arrow to cursor over to the additional providers that are part of this grouping. You can set up your own grouping of providers. So if I wanted to see just my peds, just my surgeons, just my podiatrist, I could go in and set up different groupings, and then those would be the ones that would be displayed in this multi-group view. I also have the ability to go in and look at a single doctor view. So if I wanted to see just for a single provider what appointments I had open, who I had on the schedule, I would be able to see who those appointments were. The color coding is up to you as to how you want to designate and use the colors here tied to the appointment types. And it also allows me to see the type of insurance that this patient has. If I wanted to see multiple days for the same provider, I can open up a 5-day view so I can see what's going on for the next few days for this individual. And then I also have the option to look at a monthly view. This may be more for trying to, look at the big picture of managing a provider and saying, okay, how heavily booked are they on a particular day? Maybe they're wondering about taking a day off, and I say, definitely don't take the 11th off because you're way overbooked already. But if you want to take the 23rd, go for it. So it does give me the view, and if I needed to change to a different doctor's view, I have the ability to just change views by selecting a different doctor's name here at the top. To go in and actually schedule an appointment, if I were ready to go back and schedule an appointment, I can click on any spot in the schedule so that I could go in and see and search for my patient by any of these different options. And I can have it default to whichever one of these options. You may say, well, I normally like my staff to search by date of birth, so I could have it defaulting to that. I have mine on last name. As I start to type in the name, it starts narrowing it down to only the patients that match what I'm searching for. So I could go in and start searching based on that. Now, I've also told the system that if there is a referral already in place for this patient, I want to let the front desk know about that. So the system will show me, so for some of your specialties like in surgery or your orthopedics that you need to have maybe a pre-certification referral, I would be able to see the start and stop date on when that referral, so if there was an expiration date on it. Also, if there are visits associated with, I've been approved to see this patient for 3 visits, then I would be able to see how many remaining visits were on that particular referral. If the patient does not typically see this particular doctor that I'm scheduling them with, then I can have just a reminder that'll let me know, hey, wait a minute, they normally see Dr. Ford and you're scheduling with them with Dr. Monroe. Then I could go in, identify the type of appointment that the patient is coming in for. I also can add my notes, and those are notes that I want them to be able to see over on the clinical side as well. If I also need to indicate a specific room or equipment or tie a referral to this particular visit, I have the ability to do so. Then I can save it. Now, Intergy has the capability of managing recalls. This is not something that we had available in Success. So if the patient was at the window and said, well, he wants me back in 6 months, but I can't schedule that far in advance, I could have that set up as a recall. And then when 6 months come, I could be working through that list of patients that were on the list that I needed to get added to the schedule. So you do have some abilities like that. So different options just depending on the preferences there. So that's how you'd go about scheduling an appointment. If I needed to, well, let me show you a couple of other things while I'm thinking about it. Even before scheduling that appointment, if I wanted to look at that patient's last eligibility information, I could click on that and review the most recent eligibility that I had for that patient. And maybe I say, wow, I need to update that. I could click verify eligibility even before I schedule the appointment, and the system would go off and go and do that eligibility for me. I also have the ability to put in manual entry. Maybe this was a particular plan that doesn't do electronic eligibility, but I called them and I got the information on the deductible and the family balance and the out-of-pocket, you know, that type of information. I could go ahead and enter that manually so that I would have that data stored. Now, the system can do the eligibility verification from the schedule in batch. I'm sure many of you do that on Success today. So you do have the ability to go in and tell the system that you want to verify everybody that's coming in 2 days from now, 3 days from now, whatever you want to do, and you can verify that information. We'll be talking about messaging later today, but Intergy also has patient messaging where I can send out reminders to the patient for their upcoming appointments via text, email, or it can place phone calls for you as well. So you do have some different options on reminding the patients about their appointments. If I needed to cancel or reschedule a visit, I would do that by right-clicking on the patient's name and then going in and making my selection. You do have waitlist capability as well, so that if I wanted to see who's on the wait list, or if I had a cancellation for a certain type of appointment and I had a patient waiting for that, then it also would prompt the scheduler that there's someone waiting for the type of appointment that was just scheduled. So you do have some different options of things you can do there. So that's the scheduling process. Now it looks like we have a few questions here, so let me go back up. Okay, PHQ3, you can build scoring into it so that it can calculate that, but that is something you build into the way that you set up the questionnaire. If patients were seen in multiple locations on the schedule, you do have the option of being able to see the location that's associated with that provider for that time of day. That is a difference between Success and Intergy. In Success, I would have had to have a separate column for each location by provider. In Intergy, I can just use the code associated for where that doctor is scheduled to be at that day, and I do not have to set up the multiple locations. Let's see. Can you quick register the patient for the back office? Yes, if you're doing a quick registration, you can have it to where the back office would see that more quickly. Can I enlarge my screen? No, I can't. I have it maxed out to what I can do on my monitor here. How do you let the patients sign? Okay, for signing of documents, you would have to use a third party for that, like a Health Assist or a Phreesia type application that actually has kiosk or the tablets that they can sign their documents. But not only can they sign their documents, they can check themselves in, they can pay with a credit card, they can complete their past medical history directly on that tablet, or you can also let them complete that through the portal as well. Okay, you can set up a template in the background for each provider, and you can block off as many, months into the future as you want to for those appointments. Merging duplicates, you can merge duplicate patients. That's an option you have as well. With the alerts and the different types of alerts you see, there are a lot of different preferences that you can set up unique to your practice about the way that you would want to see those items. Okay, there was a question back on the clinical section as far as restricting who can be documenting. Multiple people can be at the same chart at the same time, but they cannot be documenting the same area. So they would be restricted to only being able to do, like if two people were trying to document the progress note at the same time, one would have to wait. But I could be documenting an immunization at the same time that the doctor's doing a medication and different things like that. So you do have some different options there. And you can go in and update some information without opening, a clinical visit. It depends on the specific information. Or if there's information that requires a visit, you can set up a non-billable visit to document information with as well. So you do have some different options there. Okay, gender identity is great, yes, and we do have some additional fields for other ways that you can document your transgender patients, things like that. And I'm going to show you how to check in a patient, and I'll show you some different tabs you have there as well. So let's jump into the check-in, and then I think maybe that'll answer some of the other questions that I'm seeing. Okay, so patient flow tracking is where you would go to keep track of all the patients that are in the office, that have already checked out of the office, or the ones that I'm expecting to see today that have not yet arrived. So the ones that I'm looking at, right now I'm just looking at who's scheduled that is not yet checked in. Those show up in blue. If I wanted to see who's currently in the office, so who's in the waiting room, who's in exam rooms, I would check the in office, and then in yellow it's showing me all the patients that are currently in the office. Then if I also wanted to include who is already checked out, I'm able to do that, and I can see that in the grayed out white area. So depending on the view I want to see. Now, one thing that's different, this event category, this links back over to sort of that view that you have in the My Next Patient in Success that allows you to see where the patient is currently located. But I can see it from this front office view. I do not have to go and open up the clinical console to see where the patients are at or to assign them to a different area. So if I needed to change that patient to a different location, I can do that from the front desk as well by going into that event. Another nice thing about that is if the patient's complaining, I've been here forever and I want to see how long they've actually been in the office and when they went to each of the areas, I do have the ability to track that, wait time follow-up directly from here without having to go run a report to see that. If I were ready to check in a patient, I can see the patients, and this does display for me in time element, but you have some different options of things that you can change. Now, when I select to check in the patient, the system of Intergy allows you to define your work process that you want your staff to follow. So you're going to see in my process that the system's automatically going to prompt me to take certain steps, but that's based on the way you define it for your practice. So I've said, mark the patient checked in. Then I've said, the first thing is I want my staff to be prompted to collect the copay, and you see it has the patient's copay listed by their name here. So I could go in, put in the amount of the check, the different amount, print the receipt. I'm just going to say they didn't pay today. Then I'm told the next thing is I want my staff to actually look at the insurance information that I have stored on the patient and make sure that, do we have copies of the insurance cards? Well, yes, I do, front and back. Notice that they are attached directly to the insurance plan. So I'm not just putting them in that generic scan folder like we have in Success. I'm actually linking that directly to the individual insurance plan. And anytime your staff adds a new plan, at the end, it's going to prompt them and say, do you want to scan the insurance cards? And when they do, it automatically puts them into the correct spot here for you to be able to reference. But if I were finished with this patient's check-in, I would just close this window, patient's checked in at this point. But before we do that, I want to show you a couple of other things. Because while I'm in this window, this is one thing I really like about Intergy is the efficiency it gives me to be able to do the things I need to do without jumping around. So like patient says, hey, did you have my new address? Well, yes, I do. I see that I've captured that information. Oh, you need me to update something? I can edit it directly from here. If the patients, you're going to see alerts like this, patients in collections, so I can see what the balance is, just some quick information. But then the patient says, oh, by the way, I needed to talk to you about my previous statement. Okay, what was the question on that statement? I'm looking at it now. Okay, I can answer those questions. I didn't have to go open up account inquiry to go talk to them about their statement. Or they have a question about a claim. And maybe I typically would open up receivables and go and, look at it that way. I can see it from here. If I needed to open up more detail, I can do it. I can see that information. Or the patient saying, well, did you get that last check I sent you? Yes, ma'am, I see, here's a $50 payment. I had a question about a charge. I can review all that charge data with them. Or maybe the patient is saying, I needed to see about getting a refill request. Maybe I'm taking a phone call for the patient. And they say, I need to get my stress formula plus IR renewed. And I say, okay, well, let me go ahead and send that request directly over to your provider and ask them to refill that for you. So it creates a task directly from this window over to the provider's task list and chart of a medication request. I didn't have to leave the front desk. I didn't have to leave this window to go open up the clinical console, go into medical message to make my request. I can do it directly from where I'm at. Or maybe the patient says, hey, I just need to know if my lab results have been received. Yes, ma'am, I see that they're here. Do you want to make an appointment? That type of thing. So a lot of different things I can do without ever leaving this window. So a lot of information that's available to me so I don't have to go jumping around the system. But one thing I wanted to show you here was this extended information window. If there are additional fields that you need to track on your patient that maybe I don't have a field already sitting there named for, I could come in and name my own field. I could go in and set up what the acceptable responses are that I want my staff to be able to choose from. So if there's any additional demographic type data that you want to be able to capture on your patient, that you want to be able to report on, to extract data from, all of these fields are reportable fields. So if you have additional information that you need to capture, you have the ability to create your own view of a whole nother window, and you could have multiple if you needed multiple, of additional information that you want to capture. So you do have the ability to do that. So if you do have some different things that you want to capture there, you do have the ability to do it. Okay, so let's answer a few more questions before we take a break and then start billing. Is there a way to see all appointments if they're scheduling with multiple resources? You can. The view that we were looking at here does allow you to see all of the different providers at one time, or I could go in and limit it to a single provider or multiple providers if I needed to pull in multiple providers. So you can see multiple appointments. Remind a patient about an upcoming appointment. Yes, you can do reminders. And it is based on the patient's preferred method of communication, but you can set it up to do email and text, things like that, or phone calls as well. Patient's history of appointments. If I were looking at that patient's data, right from that same window, I can see their scheduling history here. So I would be able to open up and see their scheduling history. So I could see every appointment. I could see any details. If notes had been added on the appointment, I can see that all at the same time. if a patient is going to multiple locations, I would be able to see the location that that patient had been seen at. So if they're going to multiple locations, that's not a problem. I can track that. Okay, I'm not sure. Someone's asking about same-day appointments and then you have to cancel them individually. Okay, I'm not sure what you're referring to as far as canceling there. So if you want to give me some more context to that question, I'll try to come back to that. Set up appointment templates. We're going to be looking at as part of system administration this afternoon. We'll actually look at appointment templates. You can switch between different sections of the system by using icons or by using Control Tab like you're accustomed to in Success. You will not have access to the same information for all users. You will have to give security permissions as to who can do what. We will go into UDS required fields. I'll start that next section with showing you, the next section I'll show you some of the billing specific information and tie that into the UDS fields as well. Make changes. I'm not sure what you're wanting to make changes to there, but we can come back to that one also, Sandra. Questionnaires available at check-in. You do have some questionnaires and some PDFs, I mean some like pre-filled forms that you can do from the portal. Okay, and we'll talk about imaging if time permits as far as how do you store some additional data or images, correspondence documents. How can you? Okay, as far as saving a filter on patient, I'm not sure about that. I'll have to check on that one for you. Okay. Can you send an appointment reminding through a third-party vendor? We do have some partners out on the marketplace that do have some additional reminder capabilities, or you can use it directly out of the system as well, because we do have those built in already so that you don't have to go to a third party. You can send blast out to all patients. You can do what we call that broadcasting, so you can send out a bulk report. A bulk like email or text to patients to tell them the office is closed, something like that. Okay, the question someone had about same day, to answer that, you can set up a rule that says I'm expecting to do a walk-in at 9 o'clock and at 10 o'clock, but maybe your internal process is that, well, when a 9 o'clock, when 8 o'clock comes and we haven't filled that appointment, we're going to allow it to be done by something else. You can set up a rule in the template that says, do I allow them to override that or do I not? So that would be based on the restriction that you put into the rules definition. Okay, guys, we're going to take another 5-minute break in case you need to change out staff again, so that if you want to round up any of your billing staff, the next things we're going to be looking at will be things like looking at charge review, payment posting, journal management, those types of things. So I know I'm a little off schedule, but let's plan to start back at 9:35. So if you want to gather up your billing staff, we'll be ready to get started again.